glass shattered at 11:17 on a Thursday night, and I still remember the sound it made when my father's coffee mug hit the kitchen wall 2 inches from my head. I was 16. I had just shown him my PSAT scores. He looked at the paper, looked at me, and said, "Why are you wasting my time with this?" My brother Kevin had scored lower the year before. My father had taken him out for steak. That was the night I stopped trying to show my father anything. I grew up in Dunmore, Pennsylvania, which is the kind of town where everyone knows your father's name before they know yours. My father, Robert Callum, was the kind of man who took up space in a room without meaning to. Broad shoulders, loud laugh, the sort of handshake that made other men stand straighter. He built Callum Construction from a single truck and a borrowed nail gun into a mid-sized company with 40 employees and a reputation that stretched across 3 counties. People in Dunmore talked about him the way people talk about weather. Like he was something that just happened, something you planned your life around. Kevin was 14 months older than me. He had my father's laugh and my father's hands, and my father's complete inability to see a woman as anything other than decoration or inconvenience. They were the same person with 25 years between them, and my father loved that about him. I had my mother's eyes and my grandmother's stubbornness, and my father treated both like character flaws. My mother, for her part, tried. I want to be fair to her. She was a woman who had learned very early that peace was worth more than justice, and she had built her whole life around keeping the temperature in that house survivable. She never defended me in front of my father. But she also never stopped apologizing to me in private, in small ways. A note tucked in my lunch, a hand on my shoulder when he wasn't looking, the way she said my name sometimes, like it meant something she couldn't say out loud. Her name was Irene. She died of a stroke my second year of college, and the last thing she said to me on the phone 3 days before it happened was, "I'm proud of you, Lena. I always have been." I held on to that for years like a life jacket. My full name is Lena Callum, but everyone who matters to me calls me Lena. I was the kid who read the encyclopedia for fun, who stayed after class to ask the teacher extra questions, who applied for every scholarship she could find because she understood by the age of 13 that her father was not going to pay for her future. He'd made that clear enough. College is for people who can't figure out what they actually want to do, he told Kevin once, and then turned around and offered to pay Kevin's tuition at Penn State the moment Kevin showed any interest in a business degree. Kevin lost interest after 1 semester. My father blamed the professors. I got a full academic scholarship to Georgetown. My father's response was to ask me who I thought I was. I didn't answer him. I was already packing. Georgetown changed my life in the way that sounds like a cliché until it's happened to you. I showed up with 2 suitcases and a chip on my shoulder the size of a county, and within 6 months I had found the thing I was apparently born to do. Corporate law. My contracts professor, a small, precise woman named Dr. Eugenia Hart, watched me argue a mock case in my second semester and afterwards said simply, "You should consider the competitive circuit." She said it the way you tell someone they should consider breathing, like it was obvious, like she couldn't understand why I hadn't already done it. I competed. I won. I kept winning. I graduated summa cum laude. I got into Yale Law on a merit scholarship. I spent 3 years there with my head down and my ambition so loud inside my skull that I had to learn how to sleep with earplugs just to quiet them down. I made law review. I argued cases that other students called impossible. I graduated and took an offer with Hartwell Cross in Washington, D.C., which is one of those firms where the partners have portraits in the lobby and the coffee is always exactly the right temperature and the work will hollow you out if you let it. I didn't let it. I used it. 7 years at Hartwell Cross. Then 3 years as a federal clerk for the Honorable William O.C. on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, a man who made me read every opinion twice and write my memos like my life depended on them. And then, 2 years ago, the governor of Pennsylvania called. She wanted to appoint me to fill a vacancy on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I was 34 years old. I would be the youngest justice in the court's history and only the 3rd woman ever to serve on it. I said yes before she finished the sentence. My father found out, the way he found out most things about my life, from someone else. A colleague of his mentioned it at a job site. "Saw your daughter's name in the paper, Bob. Supreme Court Justice, hell of a thing." He called Kevin that night. Kevin texted me 2 days later. Dad wants to know if this is real. I didn't respond. Here is what I want you to understand about my father and me, because I've had years now to sit with it and I think I finally understand it clearly. He was not a cruel man in the way movie villains are cruel. He wasn't calculating. He didn't lie awake at night engineering ways to diminish me. He was something almost worse than that. He was genuinely indifferent. I simply did not register to him as something that required his full attention. I was a daughter, and in his understanding of the world, daughters were a supporting role. They were there to be fed and housed and eventually handed off. They didn't build things. They didn't lead things. They existed in the background of the story that the men in the family were writing. When I showed him evidence that I was something other than that, it confused him, and when my father was confused, he responded with contempt. It was easier than adjusting his understanding. I spent the first 20 years of my life trying to make him adjust. Then I stopped. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court holds its investiture ceremony in the Great Hall of the state capitol in Harrisburg. It's a room that was designed to make you feel the weight of what happens inside it. Marble floors, arched ceilings, oil portraits of justices going back to the 1800s. The light comes in through tall windows and falls across the room in long, serious stripes. My investiture was scheduled for a Friday in March. I invited my mother's sister, Aunt Clara, who drove 4 hours from Ohio and showed up an hour early wearing a hat she'd bought specifically for the occasion. I invited 3 friends from law school. I invited Dr. Hart, who had flown in from D.C., and who sat in the front row with her hands folded and her expression exactly as precise as I remembered it. I did not invite my father. I had not spoken to my father in 6 years. Kevin called me 2 weeks before the ceremony. He had gotten the invitation details from somewhere, a press release, probably since the court's communications office had put out a public notice. Dad wants to come, Kevin said. I didn't invite him. He's your father, Lena. I'm aware. It's a public event. I was quiet for a moment. Yes, I said. It is. I hung up. I should tell you what the weeks before the ceremony felt like, because this is the part I almost never talk about. I was terrified, not of the role, not of the responsibility. I had been preparing for something like this my whole adult life, and I knew the work and I trusted myself to do it well. That fear was manageable. That fear was fuel. What terrified me was the possibility that my father would show up and that it would matter to me. That after everything, after every year I had spent building something he told me I was incapable of building, he could still walk into a room and make me feel 16 and inadequate and desperate for something he was never going to give me. That's the thing no one tells you about estrangement. It doesn't end the feeling. It just puts it somewhere you don't have to look at it every day. The night before the ceremony, I sat in my hotel room in Harrisburg and called Aunt Clara. He might come, I said. I know, she said. I don't know how to do this if he's there. She was quiet for a moment. You do, she said. You've been doing it your whole life. You just didn't have a title before. I laughed, even though nothing was funny. A title doesn't change anything. No, she said. But it makes it harder for them to pretend you're nothing. The morning of the ceremony was cold and bright, the kind of March day in Pennsylvania that feels like an argument between winter and spring that neither side is winning. I arrived at the Capitol early enough to stand in the Great Hall alone for a few minutes before anyone else came in. I walked the length of the room slowly. I looked up at the portraits. I thought about my mother. People began arriving at 9. The room filled with the sound of heels on marble and the low murmur of a crowd that understood it was witnessing something formal. My colleagues from the court were there, along with representatives from the Bar Association, officials from the governor's office, about 40 law students from Penn State and Temple who had come as a group on a field trip. I was standing with Dr. Colaury, Harte, near the side of the room when I heard Kevin's voice. He was standing near the entrance with a man I recognized from the set of his shoulders before I even saw his face. My father had come. He was wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right across the back. The suit of a man who doesn't wear suits often enough to own one that fits. His hair was grayer than I remembered. He looked smaller than I remembered too, though I knew that was probably just perspective. He was still a large man. He was still the kind of man who took up space. He saw me, his jaw set. He said something to Kevin. Kevin put a hand on his arm. I turned back to Dr. Hart and continued the conversation we'd been having. The ceremony began at 10. I stood at the front of the Great Hall while the Chief Justice administered the oath of office. I had my hand on a Bible that had belonged to my mother's mother, who had been a schoolteacher in rural Ohio for 31 years and who had never been anything other than exactly what she wanted to be. I had tracked it down through Aunt Clara, who had kept it in a cedar box in her spare bedroom. When I touched the cover of it, I thought, she would have understood this. The oath was 22 words. I said them clearly, and when I was done, the room applauded. I let myself feel that for 1 second. Just one, and then I put it away. The reception was held in the Capitol Rotunda. Champagne, small plates from a catering company, the low, warm hum of institutional celebration. People shook my hand. People said kind things. I stood straight and smiled and meant it because I was genuinely, deeply grateful for everyone in that room who had come to celebrate this. I was crossing the rotunda toward Aunt Clara when my father stepped in front of me. He was blocking my path with the same unconscious assumption of priority he had always had. Not aggressive exactly, just completely certain that the space in front of him was his by default. "Lena," he said. I stopped. "You didn't invite me," he said. I looked at him directly. "No, I didn't." That was disrespectful. The word landed the way he'd intended it to, like a small collision. I felt it. But I did not step back. "I disagree," I said. "I'm your father." His voice was rising slightly, that familiar escalation, the edge of a man who was not used to being contradicted. "I deserve to be invited to this. You are not part of building this," I said. My voice was very calm. I had not planned the words, but they were exactly correct. "This was built without you. It doesn't belong to you." He stared at me. And then he did what I think he had always done when he felt the ground shifting under him. He said something he couldn't take back. "You are embarrassing this family," he said, loudly enough that the people nearest to us turned to look. "Standing up there like you're better than everyone. Your mother would be ashamed of you." The room went quiet. Not completely. Rooms that size don't go completely quiet. But the immediate circle of people around us, and it was a larger circle than I'd realized because conversations near me had tapered off and people had turned, that circle went very still. I felt something move through my chest. Not hurt, exactly. It had been too long for it to be pure hurt. It was more like recognition. Like hearing a piece of music you'd known as a child and had spent years trying to forget. My mother would be ashamed of you. My mother who had tucked notes in my lunch. My mother who had said, "I'm proud of you, Lena." 3 days before she died. I did not respond to him. What happened next? I did not plan, and I did not expect, and I have thought about it almost every day since. Chief Justice Margaret Okafor, who had been standing 15 feet away talking to someone from the Bar Association, walked toward us. She was 61 years old, silver-haired, the kind of woman who had spent 4 decades in courtrooms and had developed a presence that made juries sit up straighter without her saying a word. She was the reason I had wanted this position. She was the person I had wanted to become. She stopped beside me. She looked at my father for one long, measured moment. And then she turned to face the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said in the voice she used to address a full courtroom, "I would like to take a moment to recognize Justice Magdalena Callum." She did not explain why. She did not reference what had just happened. She simply said my name and my title, and one person started clapping, and then another, and then the entire rotunda, 40 law students, a dozen attorneys, 4 sitting judges, the chief of staff from the governor's office, my Aunt Clara with her hat slightly askew, rose to their feet. All of them, for me. I stood completely still and let it wash over me, and I did not look at my father because that wasn't what this was for. This was not for him. This had never been for him. It was for the girl who had gotten a scholarship she wasn't supposed to get, and a degree she wasn't supposed to want, and a career she wasn't supposed to build. It was for every morning I had woken up in a city far from Dunmore, Pennsylvania, and decided again that I was not going to let his voice be the loudest one in my head. The applause went on for a while. When it finally stopped, I turned back to my father. He was the only person in the room who had not stood up. He looked the way I had once seen a construction wall look after the building behind it had been demolished, still standing, but with nothing left to support it. Kevin was standing 3 steps away from him, and Kevin was not looking at my father. Kevin was looking at the floor. I thought of 100 things I could have said. I said none of them. "Have a safe drive home," I told my father, and I walked away. Aunt Clara found me 20 minutes later in a side corridor near the Capitol gift shop. She put her arms around me without saying anything, and I held on for a long moment, and when I finally pulled back, she looked at my face and said, "You okay?" "Yes," I said. And then, "No, I don't know. That's honest," she said. "He said Mom would be ashamed of me." Aunt Clara's expression did something complicated. She was quiet for a moment. "Your mother called me," she said, "about a week before she died. She told me about the call she'd had with you. She told me what she said to you." She paused. "She asked me to make sure you knew she meant it, that she'd always meant it, she'd just been afraid to say it for too long." I didn't say anything. "She was proud of you," Aunt Clara said. "She would have stood up with everyone else." Kevin texted me that night, "What happened today was not okay. The way he spoke to you. I want you to know I understand that now. I read it 3 times. I texted back, 'Thank you,' nothing else. But I meant it. My father has not contacted me since. I don't know if he will. I'm not waiting for it. I sit on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I read briefs on Tuesday mornings with the same cup of coffee I've made the same way for 15 years. I have a small apartment in Philadelphia with a window that looks out over a courtyard, and on weekend mornings when the light is right, I sit in front of that window and read things that have nothing to do with the law. Novels, mostly. The kind my mother used to leave on the kitchen table when I was small. I have colleagues I respect and work that matters to me, and a life I built out of the understanding, learned very young, that no one was going to hand me anything I actually wanted to keep. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy, and I don't tell it because I want anyone to think badly of my father. He is who he is. He was who he was long before I showed up, and he will be who he is long after this story stops mattering to anyone. I tell it because of the girl who is reading this right now, the one whose father doesn't show up to things, or who shows up and makes them worse. The one who got the scholarship or the promotion or the acceptance letter and felt the exact specific loneliness of having something to celebrate and no one in her family willing to celebrate it with her. I want her to know that the people who were supposed to stand up for you are not always the people who actually do. And the ones who do, even if you didn't expect them, even if they're strangers at a reception in a marble rotunda, those people are real. What they give you is real. Take it. You earned it. You were always going to earn it. I've thought a lot about what it means to finally arrive somewhere. Not a place, but a version of yourself you spent years building in the dark. Without applause, without anyone telling you the direction was right. When my father stood in that rotunda and said my mother would be ashamed of me, something in me expected to fall apart. I had spent years bracing for exactly that moment, the one where his voice found the crack in everything I'd built and split it open. But it didn't. And I've been sitting with that ever since, trying to understand why. I think it comes down to this. The things we build with our own hands, out of our own hunger, are harder to knock down than the things built for us by people who believe in us. That sounds counterintuitive, but there's a kind of structural integrity that only comes from having to figure it out yourself. Every year I spent at Georgetown without his approval, every brief I wrote at 2 in the morning at Hartwell Cross without a single person from my family asking how it was going, all of that was load-bearing. I just didn't know it at the time. My father made his choices. He chose Kevin over me at 14, and he kept choosing that, quietly, consistently for 20 more years. I used to think that was a verdict on who I was. It took me an embarrassingly long time to understand it was just information about who he was. The two things are not the same. They feel the same when you're young, when the person doing the choosing is the only mirror you have access to. But they are not the same. What I know now is that character is not something you're assigned. It's something you practice, imperfectly, over years, in the specific and ordinary moments when it would be easier not to. It was practicing character when I stayed in that library instead of going home for a holiday I hadn't been warmly invited to anyway. It was practicing character when I called Dr. Hart for advice instead of calling my father for approval I was never going to receive. It was practicing character when I walked away from my father in that rotunda without saying any of the 100 things I could have said. Intelligence gets you through the door. Discipline keeps you in the room. But the thing that determines what kind of person you are at the end of all of it, that's the choices you make when no one is watching and no one will know. Aunt Clara stood up for me before Chief Justice Okafor said a word. I saw her from across the room, already on her feet, already clapping. She had driven 4 hours and bought a hat and taken 2 days off work, and she did all of that because she believed, without reservation, that I had earned it. That is what I want to leave you with. Not the marble floor, or the title, or the moment my father's face went still. Those things happened, and I won't pretend they didn't matter to me. But the thing that carries forward is this. Somewhere in your life, there's a person like Aunt Clara. Someone who sees what you're building and shows up for it. Pay attention to those people, choose them back, and if you are still in the middle of it, still in the years before anyone stands up, still in the part where the work is quiet and thankless, and the people who should believe in you simply don't, keep going anyway, not to prove anything to the people who doubt you, but because you will, one day, want to be the kind of person who kept going, and that day will come sooner than you think.